Karen looks at me and says, Scott, this is the craziest thing I've ever done. Now you gotta understand, this is a trip that I organized. And I invited her to come on and she said yes. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what did I do? I mean, this woman can do anything. And she's telling me that this is the craziest thing that and I literally went into like panic. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this isn't good. Like this is not safe. Like Karen Dark isn't supposed to say things like that.
Yeah.
So we had a good laugh. We probably had some tears. We definitely struggled. The good news is that we made it through that conversation, and through teamwork and through the guides that we had, we successfully helped Karen Dark get to Everest Base Camp at 17,500 feet. And it was just an absolutely epic journey. And this just happened just about a month ago. In fact, I've got a couple of podcast episodes that I've released about that trip, and one more coming out in a couple of weeks, so if you want to hear more about that journey. But you know, I'm super excited to be here tonight. And Bill Barty, when we were talking about, obviously I'm here to talk about the book, but we talked a little bit about, you know, kind of the message that we want to talk about. And what he shared was this idea about how we can become better people through adventure, or how adventure can help us to become better people. And I think about that story with Karen, because for me, there's this sort of both and of being with Karen. I mean, to be with a person like that has this mindset to be able to do the things that she's been able to do. She is relentless. She has unbelievable perseverance. And to just be in the presence of somebody that just doesn't say no. She just has this intense, and she comes from a place of curiosity where it's just this intense, like, I wonder if I can do that. And she just will set out to try. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but more often than not for her, it does work. And the both and is that she's got a physical, you know, she's paralyzed from the chest down. So she needs help physically. And so this group of people that I was able to put together, there was 15 of us, including Karen and myself, and then we had 13 porters and guides that were there to help us along the way. But it was this beautiful thing where, like, we were able to physically help this woman get to base camp, but we learned so much from her about this, the perseverance. And so to me, and by the way, Karen she wrote the foreword to the book, so you can learn a little bit more about Karen in here. And but to me, adventure is about venturing into the unknown. It's about stepping into unknown. Like, adventure is not, if you know what the outcome is, and if it's comfortable, it's not really an adventure. You know, adventure is about stepping into something where you just don't know what the outcome is. And I think she kind of writes about that beautifully in her foreword. But when we talk about, like, becoming a better person, like, for me, what that means is, I think when we say the word better, I think we have to all define for ourselves what that means. You know, there's not a universal definition of better. I think it has to be whatever better means to you, what makes you a better person. And I can say that for me, better and growth are sort of intertwined. And the beautiful thing about adventure is that when you step into an adventure, you're stepping into the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen, and it's uncomfortable. And there's usually some struggle, and there's usually some, like, letting go of control. And in that process, something happens, and then the unknown and the uncomfortable maybe becomes just a little bit more comfortable. And I think when that happens, then you can kind of experience that growth. And to me, like, that's what growth is. So, and that's what kind of becoming better is. So we talk a little bit about that in this book, and I appreciate that's what y'all came here to hear about, is the book. And you know, I have this podcast, and when I sit down with people and I interview people, I just have this series of questions, and I get to ask all the questions, as Bill said. So I'm not used to sitting up here and talking about myself. So what I've kind of done is I thought through, like, how I'm going to interview myself here, right? How can I ask myself questions and then relay some of those questions to you? So, you know, how did all this get started? How did I get to this place where, like, I, you know, went on this amazing adventure with somebody like Karen Dark, to Mount Everest Base Camp, like, that wasn't, like, you don't just all of a sudden wake up one day and say you're gonna go do something like that, although some people maybe, but I think it's sort of this slow growth of stepping into an unknown, getting comfortable with that unknown, and then, you know, leading to the next adventure. So when I grew up, I had a great childhood. 2 amazing parents, sitting right here. And one of the things that, sorry. Yeah. So one of the things about my childhood was we didn't have streaming content 24/7. So I think one of the ways that I entertained myself was like trying to like figure out how to not be bored, right? Like bored all the time. And we had these woods behind our house. And so I found this one, I don't remember how old I was probably 8 or 10 years old, but there was this old smelly tent in the back of the garage, and I discovered it one weekend. And so we got the tent out and we set it up in the backyard. And I got to do this backyard camp out. And how cool that was. Like, I was safe because I had the house right there, but I got these woods in the background. And there's creatures back there. And there's like, who knows what's gonna live and what's gonna come out and, you know, get to us. And so as a little kid, to be able to sleep in the backyard and wake up the next morning and have this sort of sense of like, I did it. I slept outside. Like, that was pretty cool. You know, and so I think that was maybe the first little taste of adventure that I had. And that seems simplistic, but you know, there was a little bit of a fire that lit up in there. And I feel like, I think we all have that in some way, shape, or form. And so, you know, so this book, it's called The Campfire Within. And what I talk about in here is this idea of a campfire within, which is this flame, this fire that we all have inside of us. And all good. We all have this fire inside of us. And what I define it as in the book is this desire to live life fully, unencumbered. And I feel like the fire within is in there. It's in all of us. But sometimes, like in, you know, taking on responsibilities and you know, things that just happen throughout the course of our lives, we end up developing some of these like limiting beliefs and blocks and things that prevent that fire from really shining as brightly as it can. So when we talk about like becoming a better person and growth, like knowing that that fire exists in all of us, that's huge to me. And realizing that it's all there, it's all inside in me and every single one of you. And for me, the growth is really like identifying what those like limiting beliefs are and those blocks that are preventing that fire from really, really shining brightly. And I think I got a little taste of that in that little tent, and some adventures that have sort of happened along the way. And you know, I followed the normal path of going to college, getting a job, buying a house, getting married, having kids, and these were like all adventures in themselves, all amazing experiences. But then, you know, sort of pandemic comes around, and there's, you know, I think all of us kind of experienced some degree of maybe an epiphany or like something that was like a trigger during that kind of like just flash of shaking everything up for us. And I think it was during that time that I sort of began to level up some of my adventures and recognizing that I could do more adventuring than I had been doing. Now, just to back up a little bit, like one thing, so I am a real estate broker by day, and I love real estate. I'm a huge fan. Wealth building through real estate is one of my passions. And I was working with a client, and we were out looking at houses, and it was like 2 weeks before spring break, and he had just made a comment, you know, what are you doing for spring break? And he said, oh, well, my daughter and I are gonna go on our annual daddy-daughter road trip. And I thought, So this one was pretty young. My oldest was then like 8 years old, and I thought to myself, well, that sounds pretty cool. And he said, yeah, every year we jump in the car, we just go, and we just kind of figure it out along the way. And I thought that sounded just amazing. So immediately that year I decided that my oldest and I would go on our first daddy-daughter road trip. We threw some tents in the back of the truck, and we just went towards the North Carolina mountains, and we just we had a blast. We didn't know where we were going, we just sort of camped along the way. And it turned into an annual tradition, and so she got 5 years, and then Meryl came next when she turned 9 years old. But the very last trip that I did with Leyland, we camped up the Outer Banks. So this was so fun. We started down, I think it was Cape Lookout, and we worked our way all the way up the Outer Banks and camped along the way. And one of the nights one of the places the tent was right on the beach. And I remember like this afternoon we were just laying in the tent, and I just like had this sort of overwhelming sense of just like, wow, like I'm in my happy place right now. Like I'm in a tent, I'm on the beach, I'm with my daughter, like this is amazing. And she and I were just laughing, and it was just like one of those lazy afternoons where we were just doing nothing and just laughing. And we just started having this conversation, like how cool would it be to like encourage and inspire other people to go camping? And we felt like people that haven't had a chance to go camping are missing out. And it would be really cool to introduce people to camping and try to get people involved. And we had like probably an hour-long conversation about like what we could do and how we could do it. And that conversation kind of fizzled on that trip. But then later that summer, our whole family's first sort of, I'd call it our first epic adventure, we went to the Minnesota Boundary Waters for a month. And that was a big deal. There were a lot of limiting beliefs and a lot of work and a lot of stuff that had to happen for us to be convinced that we could actually take the time to go do that trip. But we went up and we did this amazing trip, and it was a canoe trip. So we would, put all our gear in a canoe. We'd paddle a couple of miles along a lake. We'd get to a spot where you couldn't paddle anymore, and we'd do what's called portaging the canoe across the land into the next lake. And we did 3 or 4 different lakes, and we got into what for us was the most remote wilderness that I'd ever been to. And we found our campsite for the night, and we were sitting at this campsite, and it was just gorgeous. It sort of sat up above the water, but the water was perfectly still. And there were loons out doing their little song, and the sun was setting, and the sky was like pink and yellow and white, and there were conifers lining the other side of the water, and the sun's just kind of dropping down. My oldest, she loved filtering water. You have to filter the water to drink, and she loved going out in the canoe and using the water filter. So there was like a silhouette of her canoe out on the water, and we were just kind of looking. And I remember just sitting by the campfire, and just that same feeling kind of came over me. And so a lot of you guys know me, I'm very like reflective, introverted person. I have my morning routine, and I love like thinking about things like meaning and purpose. And I spend a lot of time thinking about meaning and purpose. And we were sitting at the fire, and I looked at Maria, and I was like, man, you know what's weird? We've been on this trip for 2 weeks now, and I haven't thought about meaning and purpose once. And I was like, man, and then this thought came to me, like, why spend time thinking about purpose when you're living it? And that was like, I just felt it, like, right there. And then I was like, then I went zooming back to that night, or that day in the tent in the Outer Banks, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do something. When we get back from this trip, I'm gonna start a podcast, because I wanna share this with other people. I wanna talk to other adventurers. I wanna fuel my own fire, but I also wanna be able to talk with other people. And so that was sort of the impetus. And so when I got back from the Boundary Waters, that's what I did. And that was at that time, I was doing a lot of, and I've always done like a lot of personal growth work, going to seminars and doing these kinds of things. But at that time, I had really kind of come off like a pretty big level up with like seminars and things. I went to a Tony Robbins event. If you guys have ever heard of Tony Robbins, he's amazing. We were always going to seminars in the real estate world and listening to speakers. But I also got involved with an author named Robert Holden. He kind of leans towards the spiritual side, and I got connected with him and a mastermind group of people, and kind of started diving deep into some different topics there that kind of explored things that I had not really explored before, more kind of like the inner state, and that the sense of peace and calm that we can find within ourselves when we go looking for it. And when I got back from the Boundary Waters along that same path, I had read a book called The Art of Impossible by a guy named Stephen Kotler. And I'm gonna kind of bring this all together because the serendipity and synchronicity and all these things sort of play together. But Stephen Kotler's book is about the concept of flow, which is this idea of like being in the zone, kind of like this flow state. And his book kind of talks about the neuroscience behind that flow state. And I was so intrigued by it that I signed up for a class that he offered that basically went deep into the details of flow. And in this class, you got assigned to a PhD level coach that would help you through the curriculum. So I'd have like 8 sessions with a PhD level coach. And it was up to me to choose who my coach was gonna be. And they gave us, there was kind of a pool and you could look at their bios online. But I was on this group call where this woman was conducting like just sort of a group facilitation of like talking about the topics and things. And she had this really beautiful presence. She was just like very compassionate, but she had this wisdom and just something about her energy that just made me go like, yeah, I think that's who I want to work with. And her name was Karen Dark. And this was all done by Zoom, okay? So, you know, Zoom, you only see from here up. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about her. I just felt like this cool energy. And so I chose her, and we had a couple of coaching calls together. And, you know, she's not somebody that's just gonna like give you her life story unless you ask for it. And so that first call that I had with her, like I start to find out a little bit about her disability, and then the Paralympics and the gold medal and all these adventures and these things that she's gone on, and I'm just like, it was like peeling an onion, and I just kept finding out more and more and more, and my mind I couldn't believe that I was talking to this unbelievable adventure. Meanwhile, I was like a few episodes into this new podcast that I had just launched, and I'm like, this woman is perfect for my podcast, but she's not gonna wanna talk to me. Like, why would she wanna come on to, you know, my little itty bitty podcast? And so we had this call, and she's asking me kind of how things are going, and I'm like, you know, I need to put myself out there. This is like blocking my Campfire Within. This is a block. I just need to be willing to just ask her the question. So I was committed to asking Karen Dark if she would come on my podcast. And before I could get the words out, she goes, hey, do you think I could be a guest on your podcast? It's like, are you kidding me? Of course you can. And so of course we went on and we did a podcast episode together, and it was magic. But in that, like, this friendship started developing. And on another call that we had, she shared with me that she had this vision because she wanted to she was always, one of her places that she'd never been was the Kingdom of Bhutan. It's a little country nestled between India and China, kind of near Nepal. And she had this vision that she'd created for this trip, and she was planning to go. And I was like, oh, Karen, that just sounds amazing. And I just was kind of envisioning her and all these other, you know, incredible adventurers going and doing this thing. And she saw my enthusiasm, and she's like, you want to come? I was like, what? Really? I mean, it was immediate. Like, I knew in my heart immediately, this is a yes. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to have to figure out, you know. But I knew right away that it was a yes for me, and I would figure out how to make it work. But come to find out, she hadn't really shared this trip with anybody. I was the first person she shared it with, and then she said, well, do you know anybody that might like to come? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, Karen's putting this trip together, and she doesn't even have anybody. Now she's asking me if I could find some people to come along. So of course, one of the first people that says yes is my friend Krishna, who's sitting right here with us. And so Krishna and Karen, and there were 10 of us that ended up going. And we just had this just amazing experience, just getting to know her and her mindset. And, you know, she hand cycled across a lot of the trip. We actually had a bus, and there were 10 of us that kind of went back and forth between the bus and the bike. But this is her mode of transportation. This is what she does. And so she's not somebody that wants to be sitting on a bus, and so she rides the bike. But we learned so much from her, and this whole thing just keeps evolving and evolving. And, you know, on that trip, we've kind of developed that friendship with her. And the podcast has just taken me to these places I just never expected. And it really all just comes down to listening to the voice inside that's calling you to adventure. And it started with just like, one little adventure, and then that led to the next one, and then that led to the next one. And all of a sudden I'm like, on this podcast with this incredible human that now wants to adventure with me, and it's just like, to me, it's just amazing how, like, when you just do that little thing, and it almost seems selfish. And I think this is where sort of a both and comes in, because it almost seems selfish to go, like, I think there maybe is that perception that it's selfish to go on an adventure, right? To go do these things for yourself. It's selfish, but it's not. Because when you're following your path and you like allow that fire within you to burn, people feel that. People can feel that, and it spreads. And it's not just you. It's like when you follow your passion, it ends up spilling over to the people that are around you. And I know for me, like, somebody like her, to see her fire and to be in her presence, it makes me a better person. And so I want to be that kind of person for others. That's really important to me. And so, I think with this whole podcast, and I know I'm probably getting tight here on time, but with the whole podcast, my goal was to encourage people to listen to their own voice inside and to get outside. And originally it was just get outside and go camping. And I think we've done that, but I think what it's really done for me personally is I get to have these amazing conversations with people. I just have these one-on-one conversations, and it just so happens that we record them and then we can share them with people. But to be able to listen to the mindset of some of these people that I've had the opportunity to talk with, and to just watch how their minds work and how they, are able to step into an adventure and achieve some really incredible things, whether it's climbing Mount Everest or living in the New Zealand bush for 7 years, or, having like a very intense recovery from homelessness, and going from homelessness to living in the woods to becoming a PhD professor that now helps people overcome social issues. I mean, it's just amazing how some of this stuff has unfolded and developed into this community, and then turning into things where I'm getting an opportunity to take people on adventures. So the Nepal trip that we just did was the second of a series of adventures that I've been able to sort of curate. The first one was a backpacking trip down into the Grand Canyon, where I took two couples, myself and a guide, and we went down into the Grand Canyon, and we had this sort of metaphorical experience where we were going down into the biggest hole on the planet, but also going deep inside of ourselves. And so it was kind of this blend of a physical journey, but also like exploring what can happen when you sort of let go and surrender control, and just see what happens when you kind of step into an adventure. So that kind of brings us to a place where this comes. And a lot of what I just shared with you, I've glossed through a lot, but what's so fun for me is that up until the invitation to Bhutan, everything that had happened up to that point was part of a talk that I got to give here at Jesse Brown's during Storyteller Night. And I thank Bill Barkey so much for inviting me to do that talk here at Jesse Brown's. And so much of that talk that I gave here became the kind of the cornerstone story or the beginning of the story, at least in the first chapter, that then became this book. And so synchronicity and serendipity, they're sort of interchangeable, but they're sort of these like seemingly unconnected things that sort of come together and integrate, and that's a huge thing for me. And when you kind of step into the unknown, like all of these magical things start appearing and happening. And so this was really kind of a cool thing. So one of the people that said yes and came on the Grand Canyon adventure with me is a man named Michael Lennington. And he is the author of a New York Times bestseller called The 12-Week Year. And Michael was working on a project with a friend of his to write another book about writing, like helping people write books in 12 weeks. And we'd been on this amazing adventure. We got to know each other super deep. And so he called me one day last year, and he's like, Scott, I'm putting together this cohort of 15 or 20 people, and I'm gonna walk them through this system for a new book that I'm writing, and I need to test it out to make sure it works. Would you be interested in writing a short book in 12 weeks? And it's something that I've had interest in doing for a very long time, but it was not on my radar at all. But of course, when he asked, I had to say, well, yeah, I mean, this guy's like a bestseller, and he's offering to walk me through the writing of a book. So yeah, I immediately said yes. And so that's kind of how this started. And on the first we did a lot of stuff on Zoom, and the first couple of calls that we had, you know, obviously we need to kind of figure out what's our title, what's our theme, like what is this book that we're going to write. And I'm meeting with a group of like 15 people that all have different ideas and all different kinds of things that they're doing. And you know, the reality is, like, when I got on that call, I kind of had two different ideas in mind. You know, one was, I've been a real estate investor and a real estate broker for 20 plus years. And I think I can call myself an expert in that field. And I think I'm qualified to write a book in that. And then there was this part of me that was like, yeah, but you know, some of these adventures, like, and this is where like the inner fire, you know, started showing up for me. And this is this idea where we listen to the voice inside that calls us to adventure. Like, I knew I could write the real estate book. My heart really wanted to write the adventure book. And I talked with the group about it, and I got all this encouragement, like, write the adventure book. So I said yes, and that's what happened. And so I won't give away everything that's in the book, but I will share with you, and I think we already talked about it, this idea of the Campfire Within. And that is this idea that we need to listen to the voice inside that calls us to adventure, because we all have a fire within us. And it's just a function of whether or not we allow that fire to burn. And so I lay out 3 very simple steps for igniting that inner fire and getting rid of some of those encumbrances that block that fire from burning. And I'll share the 3 steps with you quickly. The first is to be inspired. And the second is to be open. And the third is to be amazed. And I'll just hit each one of them quickly. This idea of being inspired, it's really about paying attention to that voice that's calling. For me as a little kid, it was a tent that we set up in the backyard, and these little background and paying attention to that, like, to that fire when it burns and it says, hey, you know, this is good. We like this, right? And sometimes inspiration for me came from some kind of wacky places, pop culture. Indiana Jones was one of my favorite adventurers of all time, and you know, I think maybe even still to this day, I just want to be like Indiana Jones. He's a huge inspiration. Batman is another inspiration. You know, there's so much pop culture, and I talk about some of that in here. But I have this vision board that I created years ago, and I've got you know, places and things that I'd like to do, and all these kinds of things that sit on this vision board, and it sits in front of me in my desk every single day. And there's some real magic that's happened with that vision board. There are things on that vision board that I've put on there 10 years ago that they just kind of stare back at me. And if I have time, I'll share one more story with you about how, like, that thing has really come to life for me. But this idea that we need to be inspired, we need to have something that lights us up, that's something that we're excited about, and we can call it a goal, but it really needs to be an inspired goal, something that just really calls at you. The second one is to be open, and really being open to me is about saying yes, being willing to say yes to adventure. It's very easy to find reasons not to. It's very easy to listen to self-doubt and, you know, the things that hold us back. And I think that part of being open is like having the willingness to recognize what those things are, and then working to unwind those things, and again, allow that fire to sort of come out. And the last one is to be amazed. And that one, there are some things that we can do, but it's really, be amazed is about letting go of control. It's about surrendering and just being willing to accept whatever comes with gratitude. With gratitude. I mean, just to be willing to accept whatever circumstances there are. And I think when we can live our lives in gratitude, then it's so much easier to appreciate everything that's around us and be able to see those opportunities for adventure. Because sometimes, you know, when we live in a state of of expectation over gratitude, we get so hung up on the expectations that we don't see the opportunities that are right in front of us. So Bill asked me, how can we bring those 3 principles into our daily lives? Am I okay? Do I have enough time for one more story?
Yes.
That I can bring it all together?
Yep, bring it all together.
So this is one of my favorite stories, and it just blows it really blows my mind. I've told you about Karen Dark. I've told you about a few different things that have really inspired me in my life. But one of the things one of my influences was Batman. And I'm gonna tell you a story about how Batman led me to singing with monks in a Buddhist monastery around a campfire. Okay, so we're gonna go from Batman. We're gonna go from Batman to singing with monks. So this vision board that I told you guys about, I've been working on this vision board for years and years and years. And I remember around the time that Batman Begins, that movie with Christian Bale came out. If you've seen it, it's amazing. I loved that movie, and I think it was around 2008 or so that it came out, 2010, something like that. So it's, good 15 plus years ago. And there's a scene in that movie where Christian Bale is his parents have been shot, and he completely lost. He doesn't know what he's gonna do with his life, and he just picks up and he leaves. He just completely disappears. And he goes to the Himalayas. And he meets a guide there that gives him this little purple flower. And he says, you take this purple flower and you climb to the top of the mountain. And there you'll meet a guide. And if you can bring this purple flower up to the guide and give him this flower, he will train you. And so the music is epic. And he's in the Himalayas, and it's just this amazing scene. And it's awesome. It's super intense. And he's all bundled up, and he's hiking up through the Himalayas with this little purple flower that he's got wrapped up in his pocket. And he comes to this monastery. I mean, amazing looking monastery, way up at the top of a hill, plugged into a mountain. And I remember watching that scene. And then he goes inside and he meets his guide, and he becomes a member of the League of Shadows, and he goes through his training, and he becomes Batman there in that monastery at the top of the mountain. And this is hero's journey stuff. And oh, by the way, the one thing that I love about Batman is, he's really not a superhero. He doesn't have, Superman has incredible strength, right? Batman's just a regular guy, but he's just got this intensity, and he's got this fire, and he's just he learns how to use tools and things to become this. And I think that somehow that's a little more realistic to me. And so I just love Batman. And so this monastery, I'm just when I finished watching that movie, I'm I was creating my vision board, and I was putting pictures of things that I wanted to do in my life. And one of the things I was I want to go visit an epic looking monastery that's built into the side of a mountain in Batman Begins. And I remember that, I think I still have it on my computer. There's, 10 pictures of different places. Mount Kilimanjaro was one of the things that I printed out. And I printed all these out. And I remember I went to Google and I just typed in epic monastery built in mountain in Himalayas or something like that. And a picture came up, and I found this awesome looking monastery, and I printed the picture and it went on my vision board. This is 15 or 20 years ago. So you'll read about this. Kilimanjaro happened a couple of years ago. I got an invitation out of the blue to go climb Kilimanjaro, and so that it's a story in the book where the picture of Kilimanjaro on my vision board just kind of popped me in my head when my friend called and asked if I wanted to go. But around that same time that I put the Kilimanjaro picture on, I had put that epic monastery picture on there. And so I told you guys all the story about how Karen Dark invited me to go to Bhutan with her. And I immediately said yes. I didn't know anything, honestly, I didn't know anything about Bhutan. I didn't even know where it was. I was just so enamored that this amazing woman wanted to go on an adventure with me. So I just said yes, I was all in. And she said, okay, cool, well, I have a PDF that I created, a little vision thing, and I'll send it to you. So she sent me this PDF, with the details of the trip. And on the very first page was a picture of this epic looking monastery built into the side of a mountain. And I'm I recognize that. And I'm not kidding. I had it looked familiar to me, But like, I had no idea where it was or what it was. But then it like came to me like, wait a minute, I've seen that picture before. And sure enough, I went over to my vision board. And again, like, I didn't even know, when I printed it, I had no idea where it was. But that same exact picture was on my vision board from like 10 years earlier. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to that monastery. It's called the Taksang Monastery. That's the Bhutanese name for it, or the Buddhist name for it. It's also known as the Tiger's Nest Monastery. And if you Google Tiger's Nest Monastery, you'll see it is amazing. I mean, it's like, you have to hike way up to get to it, and it's just plugged right into the side of this rock. And so, you know, be inspired. Batman. I mean, of all things, like this movie that I really loved inspired me to print a picture and put it on the board. Be open. You know, Karen Dark said yes, and at that point I had kind of opened up myself enough to be able to say yes to adventure. So I said yes. And then, like, magic just happens. You step across the threshold into adventure, and these amazing things happen. So now I'm going to Bhutan, I'm gonna visit this monastery that's on my list. And oh, by the way, while we're there, we get to spend the night in a monastery with a High Lama from Bhutan, a high Buddhist leader, and his monks. So we got to spend the night, it was part of our itinerary, we spent the night with them. And we went outside, and after dinner, his monks made a nice big campfire for us. And so we went outside to the campfire, and we sat around the campfire, and we were just kind of hanging out and just, you know, talking and whatever. And I just, you know, I was just kind of feeling it that night. And you're gonna laugh because you know this, if you don't already know it. But I just decided, hey, you know, we're sitting around a campfire, we should be singing campfire songs. And so one of my very favorite campfire songs, you guys are gonna appreciate this, one of my very favorite campfire songs is this little song called One Bottle of Pop. And so, before you know it, and it's a round, so there's 3 verses, you get this group to sing, and then this group to sing, and this group to sing, and there's harmony, and you go through the whole thing. Hey Corey, how you doing? You go through the whole thing, and before you know it, there is, I don't know how many, you know, 20 monks and Kedruk Rinpoche, a high lama, a high respected lama. We're all singing One Bottle of Pop around the campfire.
You even got him to sing it.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, you know, and so this idea, like, be amazed, I mean, it was just amazing to be able to have that experience. Now, there's 3 people in this room that'll understand what I'm gonna share next, which is that this is actually a redemption story. Yeah, because on my 30th birthday, if you've been here for a while, you remember the Rheinlandhaus right around the corner, the German restaurant? So Maria had a surprise party for me at the Rheinlandhaus.
You gotta bring up that story, aren't you?
I am. And you know, it was my 30th birthday, and so let's just say there was a lot of flowing good German beer at this thing, and I had a lot of it. And I don't really remember all of it, but apparently I got up on a table and conducted the whole room singing One Bottle of Pop. And so I woke up the next morning thinking to myself, like, oh man, what did I do? Hey guys, what did I do? I was so embarrassed. I felt like an idiot. I was like ashamed. I just, like, what am I doing? And so I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but when we came back from Bhutan and I think about this, like, I let my Campfire Within burn, and I got, you know, monks in a Buddhist monastery to sing this whole song. Like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It was redemption, you know? So that was an amazing experience. And Bill Barty, you asked. So what do you think?
I think you're hitting it.
Come on over here. You're gonna help me.
Oh, we're gonna sing.
Yeah.
Oh,
So Krishna's here. He's gonna help me.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna. Oh, you're gonna read it? Okay.
Oh, no.
So I'm just gonna. You don't have to sing along if you don't want to, but I'm gonna finish with One Bottle of Pop for you guys. All right, and if you wanna join me, you can. And Charlie Knight knows it well, and so does Ange. And so the first verse goes, 1 bottle of pop, 2 bottle of pop, 3 bottle of pop, 4 bottle of pop, 5 bottle of pop, 6 bottle of pop, 7 bottle of pop, pop. Okay, that's verse 1. Then verse 2 is, don't throw your trash in my backyard, my backyard, my backyard. Don't throw your trash in my backyard, my backyard's full. Third verse, fish and chips and vinegar, vinegar, vinegar. Fish and chips and vinegar, pepper, 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 salt. All right, so now it's a round. So Bill Barty, you're gonna help me. We're gonna do 1 bottle of pop, and you're just gonna keep singing 1 bottle of pop. You're not gonna stop.
Okay, I've got that. I can do this one.
And then Krishna and Charlie are gonna do Don't Throw Your Trash in My Backyard. And Maria and Meryl are gonna do Fish and Chips and Vinegar.
All right.
And so if you wanna participate, everybody kind of over here does 1 bottle of pop. Everybody over here does Don't Throw Your Trash in My Backyard. And everybody over here is gonna do Fish and Chips and Vinegar. And I'll lead you, right? Okay, so we're gonna start. So, and I'll point you when it's your turn, right? So we're gonna start over here. 1 bottle of pop. 1 bottle of pop, 2 bottle of pop, 3 bottle of pop, 4 bottle of pop, 5 bottle of pop, 6 bottle of pop, 7 bottle of pop, pop. Keep going now. Don't throw your trash in my backyard, my backyard, my backyard. Don't throw your trash in my backyard, my backyard's full. Keep going. Fish and chips and vinegar, vinegar, vinegar. Fish and chips and vinegar, pepper, 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 salt. Hey! It's redemption. You don't have to drink a whole bunch of alcohol to do that with a whole group of strangers. Thank you guys so much for supporting me here. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer?
I will tell you, before Scott got here, he said, this is months ago, when I knew the book was coming out, he said, you know what, I'm not interested in doing a full book tour. I don't want to go around the country, the city, and purposefully do this. But I thought that he had something to give us, and I'm really glad that you shared it with us, at least here tonight. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Scott, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So your story is so amazing and inspiring. So when Hollywood
I knew this was
of this story, I think we know what it's going to be called, but who's going to play you in the movie?
So for those of you that haven't heard the podcast, I ask every guest at the end of every episode that exact question. And so we actually did a client event at our office, the Gingerbread House in Elizabeth, for my real estate company, and it was a Halloween party. And that year I dressed up as Ted Lasso.